Consumers know exactly what they want from a watermelon beverage. They expect a clean, light, and refreshing profile that immediately tastes like summer. But delivering that exact profile at a commercial scale reveals a stark reality. Formulating a stable, packaged beverage using real watermelon is notoriously difficult. The difficulty stems from a direct formulation paradox. The precise sensory properties that make the fruit appealing to drinkers are the same properties that make it structurally fragile in a manufacturing environment. The first point of structural fragility is its composition. Watermelon has an exceptionally high water content compared to almost any other commercially processed fruit. This high water content correlates directly with a naturally low Brix level. Brix is a technical metric used to measure the dissolved sugar-to-water ratio in a liquid. Because watermelon lacks the dense, heavy sugars found in fruits like mango or cherry, its puree provides very little physical density. The final physical limitation is a severe lack of suspended solids. Suspended solids are the microscopic particles of fiber and fruit tissue that physically thicken a juice and give it mouthfeel. When you combine high water content, an extremely low Brix, and negligible suspended solids, you are left with a raw ingredient that lacks the physical mass necessary to carry its own flavor profile through industrial blending and piping systems. The clean, delicate taste that drives consumer demand acts as a severe engineering liability. The raw ingredient requires total structural intervention to survive commercial production. To understand how this fragility manifests, we can look at a standard R&D lab test, blending a simple mixture of 100% pure watermelon puree and water. The initial sensory evaluation of this pure blend is almost always positive. It successfully delivers a sharp, immediate, and highly accurate watermelon aroma on the nose. The first hit on the palate matches that accurate aroma perfectly, often tricking formulators into believing the simple blend is ready for production. This graph plots flavor intensity over a single sip. Notice the sharp spike representing the initial aroma. Without physical solids or Brix for structural support, the intensity collapses instantly. Engineers call this the empty finish. The liquid feels thin and watery before the sip completes. Achieving a scientifically accurate aroma in the lab yields no commercial value if the physical structure of the liquid cannot sustain that exact flavor through the entire duration of the sip. Moving from a testing lab into a commercial cold-pressed juice manufacturing environment requires a completely different approach to formulation. Clean label manufacturers operate under strict ingredient constraints. They cannot fix an empty finish by dropping in artificial flavor boosts or adding synthetic chemical thickeners. This diagram outlines the engineering solution required for clean label formulation: flavor architecture. At the top of the structure is a thin, fragile layer called the top note, which contains the volatile aromatics. In a successful clean label formula, watermelon must function exclusively as this fragile top note. It cannot support its own weight, leaving a massive structural void underneath it. The first requirement is building the base body. Formulators achieve this by blending in complementary fruits, like apple or pear, specifically for the purpose of adding physical suspended solids to the liquid. Next, engineers construct the mid-palate. This requires precisely balancing the acidity and sweetness of the blend to create a sensory bridge between the heavy solid base and the light top note. Once locked together, this completed structure operates as a unified delivery system. The complementary solids and carefully calibrated acids physically catch the volatile watermelon aromatics. They hold the flavor profile on the palate, entirely eliminating the empty finish and extending the sip. To successfully manufacture a clean label beverage that tastes authentically like real watermelon, formulators rely heavily on non-watermelon ingredients to build the physical body the raw fruit inherently lacks. This physical architecture becomes mandatory during the final stage of commercial manufacturing, high-pressure processing, or HPP. HPP is a cold pasteurization technique that uses extreme hydrostatic pressure to sterilize products. Whether utilizing HPP or traditional thermal pasteurization, these preservation methods apply extreme physical and thermal violence to the delicate chemical bonds of the liquid. This model shows what happens when an unsupported watermelon formulation undergoes industrial stress. Without a base body or mid-palate, the extreme pressure instantly crushes the fragile top note, destroying the flavor. Conversely, observe how a properly architected formula behaves under the exact same conditions. The integrated structure holds the weight, protecting the aromatics entirely. The dense physical solids and buffered pH levels act as a mechanical shield. They absorb the processing stress and prevent the volatile watermelon compounds from degrading. A meticulously designed flavor profile only remains commercially viable if its engineered physical structure can survive the violence of industrial stabilization. Formulating with watermelon top notes requires a different strategy when moving from juices into complex beverage bases, specifically fermented craft beers and spirit-based ready-to-drink cocktails. The unique challenge of these categories is that the base body is already firmly established. However, that base consists of heavy, aggressive compounds like ethanol, roasted malt, and hops. In breweries, the specific chemical threat occurs during fermentation. Active yeast aggressively consumes the delicate fruit sugars from the puree and violently strips away the subtle aromatics in the process. In RTD cocktails, the threat comes directly from high-proof spirits. The sharp ethanol bite easily overpowers and masks high-water, low-Brix purees. There is a strict formulation rule for operating in these hostile environments. Watermelon must never be forced to drive the primary flavor profile of the beverage. The correct engineering approach restricts the puree to an intentional enhancement. It is applied specifically to complement the heavy base, rather than attempting to compete with it. The sensory objective here is precision. The formulator aims to achieve a crisp, distinct top note that cuts cleanly through the alcohol, without getting lost in the dense background compounds. In chemically hostile environments, expecting a delicate ingredient to do heavy lifting guarantees failure. Success requires precise, restricted placement of the flavor. The theoretical physics of flavor architecture eventually meet the harsh operational realities of scaling a recipe for mass production. Because watermelon is so structurally fragile, the formulation margin for error on the production floor is practically zero. Even microscopic variations in the raw fruit's properties will be heavily magnified during high-volume processing, quickly ruining the carefully balanced architecture. This dashboard tracks the critical metrics that suppliers must rigidly control. If the exact Brix levels and precise pH measurements of the puree fluctuate wildly outside these tight bands, the formula breaks. Inconsistent puree forces formulators to guess ratios, leading to unpredictable flavor decay between batches. But sourcing a highly standardized specification-controlled puree smooths out that variance entirely, locking the raw ingredients' properties safely within the control bands. Securing these baseline physical properties is the only way an engineer can accurately scale a precise recipe, from a single 10-gallon test batch to millions of gallons in commercial tanks. Commercial scalability is entirely dependent on this rigorous control of variables before any blending or processing even begins. Great beverage makers engineer a perfectly controlled physical environment that supports a fragile ingredient. By respecting the physical limitations of the fruit, they turn a fleeting flavor into a structurally sound, repeatedly flawless commercial product.